Hey gamers, this is Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here for another Gearloc guide. Today we're going to be covering Dart. There's a lot going on with her, but I promise she's actually super playable, so the hope is that by the end of this video, you are going to feel totally comfortable giving her a try on game night. So Dart has had a pretty tough life. Nobulus subjected her to terrible experiments while trying to make her into a super weapon, but what didn't kill her has made her stronger, and she escaped with her battle companion and best friend, Boar'd. Boar'd is a Pegadillo who is sometimes separated from Dart, but who can also give her a ride, and we're going to talk about how that all works. In Rampage mode, they are a formidable team. Dart is a two-sided Gearloc, so we're going to go over how to handle that aspect of playing her in this video. For now, though, we've got all of Dart's stuff. We have her Gearloc mat, we have a battle mat with a sample enemy on it that we can go beat up on. We've got all of her dice, her chip, Boar'd's chip, and of course her little Gearloc reference sheets, or should I say sheets. So she's got one that looks just like all the other Gearloc reference sheets with the dice and the strats on it. And she's also got a smaller one that describes what it's like when she turns into Dangerous Dart. And we are going to thoroughly cover this in this video, so do not worry. Just because there's two sheets does not mean that it's going to be super tough. We got this. That said, Dart can be a complicated character. She is rated a 3 out of 4 in both co-op and solo. So if you are just playing Too Many Bones for the first time, she may not be the best character for you. But if you're experienced with the game and you're ready to try something a little spicy, then Dart is here for you. So like all Gearlocs, Dart has an innate ability. Hers is the presence of Boar'd, who is her Pegadillo companion. And to represent Boar'd, she has a die that starts out on her die mat. Boar'd, innate. So you have a little die that has Boar'd's cute little tusks on it. And her ability is, of course, called Pegadillo Wrangler. Just to show you, Boar'd has a 6-sided die, but there are only 3 possible results, which represent Boar'd's HP when you roll its die and put it in battle. So Boar'd can have up to 3 HP, but there's also a side for 2 and for 1. When you have Pegadillo Wrangler, which is Dart's initial innate ability, you roll this die at the start of battle, and you put Boar'd into play with the number of HP that is represented on the die. So in this case, we rolled a 3, Boar'd would go in with 3 HP, but sometimes it only goes in with 1 or 2. Once you get to Dart's innate +1 ability, which is Pegadillo Master, you actually get to choose the die face that this starts on. So basically, you're always going to be able to start Boar'd with 3 HP once you're a little further into the game. But we're going to talk a lot more about that as we get into what you can do with Boar'd and Dart together. So just a couple more things about Dart before we get down to some nitty-gritty. Dart is a ranged character, and that means that she's going to start on one of the ranged spots on the battle mat. And of course, you might have guessed that because she throws darts. However, there are also some special aspects of Dart's attack that I want to talk about before we get down to what exactly all of her dice do. That said, Dart throws darts with her attack dice, and she also has control of these special drugs called agents, and they are represented by these dice in her profession. This first column in her first profession, which is called bioweapon, does not contain any agents, but the other 3, so pharmacist, toxicologist, and pathologist, all consist of agents, and there are special rules for how to throw them that we're going to go over imminently. She's also got one consumable, which we will of course discuss. So the way I want to do this is first I want to talk about Boar'd and how Boar'd comes onto the board. Then I want to talk about how Dart actually attacks, because she has very special rules for how she can target enemies and throw attack dice. And then we're going to talk about what all these individual dice do. After that, of course, we're going to talk about Dangerous Dart mode, which is Dart's special ability that makes her extra special to play. And it's also the reason why she has a second reference sheet, so we're absolutely going to get there. All right, so let's talk first about how both Dart and Boar'd get on the board. All right, so Dart is, as we discussed, a ranged fighter. So when she deploys to the battle mat, you put her in a ranged spot. So let's say that we put Dart here with her 2 HP that are just on her Gearloc mat, just for illustration purposes. So then what's going to happen is we're going to put Boar'd out. And so in order to do that, the first thing you do is you roll the Boar'd die at the start of battle. All right, we rolled a 2. We're going to put this in a lock slot on the Gearloc mat. And then we're going to put Boar'd out with 2 HP, because that's how many HP are on the die. So the way this is going to work is Boar'd has 2 options for deployment. We can either put Boar'd in any of the melee slots on the board, because Boar'd, when operating solo, is melee. So we could choose to put Boar'd here, or any of the melee spots of our choosing. Alternatively, we can choose to begin the battle with Dart mounted on Boar'd, in which case we're going to have Dart on top of Boar'd, and both of them just in this one spot. So when Boar'd and Dart are in the same position on the battle mat, then Dart automatically mounts Boar'd. So first, let's talk about the rules when they are separate. When Dart and Boar'd are separated, Boar'd can be individually targeted by baddies as an opposing unit. However, Boar'd is part mech and so has some special advantages in this condition. So Boar'd is immune to poison, weaken, terrify, stun, bleed, and fatigue. So those are all statuses that Boar'd on its own will not have to suffer from. When Dart is mounted on Boar'd, technically Boar'd is considered untargetable. So basically Dart is the one who would always be targeted by a baddie, but then when Dart is hit, you can choose either Dart or Boar'd to take the resulting damage from that baddie. However, there's also no spillover. So if this baddie comes over and does 3 damage to Dart while mounted on Boar'd, you have to choose which one of them all 3 of that damage is going to go to. And with each of them having 2 HP, you really can't lose Dart. So it's got to be Boar'd. So Boar'd would get knocked out, and Dart would just be fine. So even though Boar'd only has 2 HP, there is no spillover. If you choose for Boar'd to take the damage, it'll take all the damage, and then nothing will affect Dart for that particular attack. But one thing to note again is that Boar'd and Dart cannot split the damage. One or the other of them has to take it. The other thing is that Dart can offload most kinds of damage onto Boar'd, but she has to take true damage and fatigue herself. So she can't get fatigued and be like, oh, Boar'd will take that damage for me. She still has to take that damage on her own. As you can guess, Boar'd does die pretty often in this game. So when that happens, Boar'd's chip is removed. So we'll just take it as if that had happened. And then Boar'd's die gets exhausted. And there's one way to bring Boar'd back one time per battle, but we're going to get to that much later in the video. Meanwhile, if Dart is KO'd, then Boar'd is immediately exhausted and removed from the battle mat. So let's retcon that just to talk about one more thing, which is how they share turns. So let's just say that this is how they are positioned. Boar'd and Dart share a turn. So during Dart's movement phase, Boar'd can move up to 2 positions without spending any dex. And that actually applies whether or not Dart is mounted on Boar'd. So one huge advantage to being mounted as Dart is that because Boar'd's movement costs 0 dex, if you are mounted on Boar'd, you get basically 2 dex-free movements every single turn. I do want to note, however, that 1 or 2 move is all Boar'd gets. Boar'd can't move any further than that, with or without dex. So if they move individually, Boar'd can move 2 times for free and not spend any dexterity, and then Dart can spend as much dexterity as she needs to move where she wants to go. But if Dart is mounted on Boar'd, that means that she gets to essentially enjoy Boar'd's 2 movement and not spend any dex for those. So being mounted can be super advantageous if you don't need to move that far and you want to use all of your dex on dice. If you want to mount or dismount Boar'd, the process is actually pretty easy. So basically all that has to happen for Dart to mount Boar'd is for Boar'd to move through the space where Dart is. So Boar'd can basically come through and pick Dart up. And similarly, Dart can move through Boar'd space to hop on Boar'd. Haha. And if Dart wants to dismount, then you spend dex for her to move off of the space where Boar'd is. So she can just automatically dismount by moving and spending dex to do so. She can just move away from Boar'd. I should also note that Boar'd does not actually have an attack stat, so Boar'd on its own does not roll attack dice. It can only move. So that's the basics of Dart and Boar'd and how they interact together on the battle mat. We also have to talk a bit about Dart's special way of attacking. So let me grab another enemy to make this extra good as an illustration. So let's say there are actually 2 baddies on the board. Let's say that there is a Troll Youngin and an Orc Rager who are here and ready to challenge us for battle mat supremacy. That's going to lead us to some interesting choices for Dart, and it's one of the things that makes her tough to play solo. So Dart is very impressive in that she is able to target multiple baddies. However, that power comes with a cost, and the cost is that actually Dart can only roll 1 attack die against each baddie. So, for example, we haven't modified her stat yet, so she has an attack stat of 2. That means that Dart can roll 2 attack dice per turn, but she cannot roll both of them against one enemy. If she rolls these attack dice, she has to decide which one she's going to attack per. So I could attack the Troll Youngin with 1 die, a bones, and then I would have to attack the Orc Rager with a different attack die. So Dart has a special power in the sense that she can target multiple baddies on the same turn, But she also has a handicap because she cannot use more than one attack die against an enemy target in the same turn. The other trick to Dart's attack stats is that in order to roll these different agent dice, you need to use an accompanying attack die that then exhausts. So we're going to talk about all the different agents, but let's just say that Dart wants to roll an agent against one of these baddies. So we are going to grab this die, we're going to grab an attack die, and I cannot roll this die alone. I have to roll it with an attack die. And then once I do that, I can apply the effects of this agent and I can do my attack damage. But because I use the attack die in conjunction with an agent, the attack die is going to exhaust. And that means that I've basically temporarily lowered my attack stat for the duration of battle. So if you want to use your attack dice with Dart for multiple turns, you might not want to use agents right away because you can end up exhausting all of your attack dice. This becomes less onerous, however, further on in the game because you can roll up to 3 agents with an attack die. So if for some reason I wanted to, I could just take 3 different dice that are agents. Like let's say that I trained these and I could roll all of these against one baddie with just one attack die that's going to then exhaust. So all of these would impact the baddie and this would exhaust. And we're going to talk about what all of these dice do, but the main thing to know for now is that they cannot be rolled individually. You have to roll them with an attack die, and then after you do it, the attack die is exhausted. The other thing to know about agents before we talk about what specifically they do is that there are major benefits to rolling multiple agents against an enemy, and I'm going to explain that really quick again before we go into the specifics of what each of these agents does. So basically, let's say that we rolled 3 different agents successfully against a baddie. They would all just sit here on the baddie chip, and then these agents would activate at the start of the infected unit's turn. So if I infect this baddie with 3 different agents, they're all going to activate at the start of the baddie's turn. Then at the end of the baddie's turn, I remove 1 agent and one of my choice. So one of the reasons you might want to roll multiple agents once you've trained enough of them is that there might be one that you want to have more long-lasting effects against a baddie. So you roll the one that you really want, and then 2 more that you can take off at the beginning of a couple of successive turns to leave the most damaging one on there the longest. The other interesting fact about Dart is that in co-op mode, you can actually use Dart's agents to help your allies. Some of her agents are actually helpful, and you might want to use them on allies. However, even if you want to shoot one of your allies with a helpful agent in the form of a dart, you still have to roll that agent with an attack die. And that means that you have to harm your friend in order to help them. So some of these agents have really cool powers, but there are also tremendous risks with using them because Dart has to roll an attack die with, and the target, whether it's an ally or a baddie, has to take the damage. So now that we know some of the basics about Dart, so how she and Boar'd work together, how her attack dice work, and how they work in combination with agents, we can now talk about what specifically all of her dice do. So as we know, die number 1 is Boar'd, and we're just going to move down through her bioweapon profession to talk about each of these dice and what their powers are. The next die in this profession is called Rejuvium, and this is basically for Boar'd. So as you can see, there is a nice little strong arm on it. Some of the sides have a strong arm with healing. But basically how this works is, this is for Boar'd or theoretically another companion. When you target a companion with this die roll, the next time that that companion is targeted, it may avoid all damage and effects on that turn. So basically this die makes Boar'd temporarily untargetable, and if you roll a side with a heart, it also causes Boar'd to heal up to the number of HP printed on the side of the die. So this is super handy when you're trying to protect Boar'd, especially when Boar'd is not currently carrying Dart around. So when Dart is mounted on Boar'd, then Boar'd is untargetable. But as an individual agent, Boar'd can be targeted as an opposing unit by enemies. So you want baddies to not be able to hurt Boar'd. This is your die. This next die is called Stolen Tech, and it has a plug on it, and then various colorful numbers. So sometimes there's just a yellow 1. Sometimes there's a blue 1, and sometimes there is a yellow 1 and a blue 1. So what does that mean? Basically, this die allows a targeted Gearloc to unexhaust a die that corresponds with the number on the die face that's rolled. So yellow lets you unexhaust an attack die. So if you recall, when Dart uses her agents, she has to roll them with an attack die, and that attack die then exhausts. That is pretty damaging if you don't have very many attack dice, or if you're in the heat of battle, especially if you're playing solo. So you need ways to get your attack dice back. This die, this stolen tech, is one way to do that, because this yellow one lets you unexhaust an attack die. Blue lets you unexhaust one die of any type. So if you want an agent back, if you want an attack back, if you want anything back, then blue is your color. And if, of course, you get a 1/1 die face, then you can have one attack die and one die of any type back from the exhausted pool. So that is stolen tech. And then our final die in the bioweapon profession is called Deliriant. And Deliriant is interesting. As you can see, it will have a bones on each face, and it also has a little extra function. So you'll see that you have a +3, a +2, or a +1. So what this die does is it functions as bones, so it can go in your backup plan. And it also adds movement when Dart is in rampage mode with Boar'd. So at various points in the game, Dart can turn into Dangerous Dart and rampage around. And I'm going to show you how to do that at the end of the video. And this die is going to help during that time. So when Dart and Boar'd are in rampage mode, and they come to this die when working through their backup plan, this die will add movement according to the face that you rolled. So that's Deliriant, and I think we should probably come back to that a bit later. All right, so now it's time to get into the agents that Dart uses to do her job. So her first profession that we're going to talk about that's full of agents is called Pharmacist, and it's this column right here on the Gearloc mat. As you might guess, because this profession is called Pharmacist, these are actually generally helpful agents. They're typically buffs of some kind. So these are the ones where you might hurt somebody a little bit to help them. So the first agent in this group is called Backitole. But basically, this is a die that lets you buff up your backup plan. So this die allows you to place available attack and defense dice as bones in your backup plan. So you might place 1 or 2. And this is also a moment to discuss the bones on Dart's dice, because some of them are special. So some of Dart's bones are these special blue-filled bones. And these blue bones are special because they have 2 potential uses. You can either put them in your backup plan, or you can use them as an agent when rolled. So why would you want to use bones as an agent? If you recall, I mentioned that you can roll up to 3 agents against a baddie, but one of them is going to come off at the end of each following baddie turn. If you want something damaging to stay on a baddie for longer, if you use these blue bones as an agent, then they can be removed first, leaving the nastier stuff on the baddie for longer, and thus doing more damage to it. However, that's not all these blue bones do. Just like Backitole itself, these bones cause either a Gearloc who is infected with this agent to add bones to their backup plan, or it will trigger the bones effect on baddie chips. The other thing that Backitole can do is potentially be used against a baddie, because if you use this as an agent on a baddie, it simulates the baddie rolling bones, and therefore it might accidentally hurt itself if that's a bad thing. So for example, our classic troll youngin has a backup plan that's called Careless. So every time it rolls a bone, it accidentally hurts itself. If you use that Backitole agent on the troll instead of on one of your Gearlocs, it will have to use its backup plan with some damaging results. So that is Backitole. It buffs up your backup plan, forces baddies to use their damaging backup plans, or provides you with bones that you can either put in your backup plan or use as an agent to kind of have a placeholder to keep nastier stuff on baddies for longer. So now that we covered Backitole, let's move to the next one. We've got Stimulant. Stimulant is, again, a kind of die that will make the effects of an agent last longer. So basically, when you use this to infect a unit, instead of removing this agent from the infected unit at the end of the turn, you can tick down the stimulant counter to keep things going. So just one number on here will just be 1 turn. But this 2 means that when it's time to remove a stimulant at the end of a baddie turn, I can just take it down to 1 and leave it on there a little longer. So 2 is the highest value for stimulant. And of course, there is also a lovely blue bones face, which we described a little earlier. So that's Stimulant. Next, we've got Retroactizor. And this one has an interesting effect because Dart can force an infected unit to re-roll the number of dice it rolled this turn that is reflected on the Retroactizor die. And you can do this before resolving the dice. So you can force the target of your agent to re-roll either 1 die or 2 on its turn. And so if a baddie rolls some horrible dice against you and you want to force it to re-roll, you actually can do that before resolving the dice. You just have to hope that the results you get on that second roll are actually helpful, because, you know, it's die rolling. It's always a risk. But this die forces 1 to 2 re-rolls, or it just gives you another blue bones. And then we have the charmingly named Roids, because Dart is responsible with exercise. So this unit is going to do the number of damage on the die to an adjacent unit of Dart's choice. So Dart gets to choose who this hurts. So basically, your die side options are 1 or 2, and on the infected unit's turn, Dart can force that infected unit to do the amount of damage on the die to an adjacent unit. So you can make one baddie hurt another baddie, ideally. And then you also have some blue bones. And those are Roids. Don't do drugs, kids. All right, so now let's talk about Dart's third profession, which is toxicologist, and it's this one going straight down her Gearloc mat. Toxicologist also has 4 dice in it. And these are definitely all bad. There is no reason why you'd ever use these on one of your allies. The first die in this profession is called Numbcor, and let's go ahead and take a closer look. So Numbcor, I mean, the purple's a little dark, but you can see it's got basically a little foot and then a -1 or just a bones face. And those are the only options. You can either get -1 or bones. But what this does is this reduces a baddie's movement by 1. So they can just move 1 less on their standard movement. So that is Numbcor. Very nice and simple, but devastating. This next one is called Confuzitole. So some sides have a 2 on them. Some sides have a 1, but basically this reduces the baddie's attack stat by the number that's printed on the die this turn. It also impacts which Gearloc the baddie is going to target. While it is infected with Confuzitole, the baddie has to have as its preferred target the strongest member of the party. So no matter what its chip says, sometimes the chip will say, oh, target the weakest. If it's infected with Confuzitole, it will always target the strongest. And of course, it'll have a reduced attack stat. There's also, of course, a nice little blue bones face because you just got to have it. So that's Confuzitole. Next, we have Moveawound, which is exactly what it sounds like, actually. So you have a little boot on the side, and you can get a 1 or a 2 or a blue bones if you're unlucky, but let's talk about what the boot side actually means. So what this number means is that the baddie is dealt this number of true damage if it moves this turn. So baddies who are moving to attack you could do 2 or just 1, but still it's devastating, true damage to themselves just because they were relocating towards you. So that is Moveawound. It is pretty great, I'm not going to lie. And then you have one more in this profession, and this one is called Agitatizole. And again, this one has numbers printed on the side, so you can have a 2, a 1, or a blue bones. But what these number results do is they allow Dart to move a baddie up to the number of positions printed on the die on their turn. So if you want to move an enemy into a more advantageous position or put a baddie where it's easier to hit, then you definitely want Agitatizole. Side effects may include being relocated and not knowing how you got there. So that's Agitatizole. So that completes Dart's toxicologist profession, and she has one more profession that's called pathologist, and then a consumable, which we're about to talk about. So let's start with the pathologist profession. The first die in this profession is called Tetanus, as indicated by the nice little pointies on it. So there's only 2 possible faces you can roll. You can get this 1 with some little nails for the baddie to step on, or you can get blue bones. So the blue bones, of course, work exactly as explained earlier in the video. But this side is great because the baddie is going to take this number of true damage when the agents activate. So I like to get this on there with some other agents and then just leave it on a baddie for as long as it's humanly possible because true damage is my favorite kind of damage unless it's being done to me. So that is Tetanus. Give it to your enemies, don't give it to your friends. The next die in this profession is called Locjaw. And it's one of those die abilities that impacts baddies who are at a certain baddie point threshold or lower. So this is going to have an impact on baddies with 5 or fewer baddie points. So any 1s, 2s, or 5s. And this one is nice because it suspends that unit's skills until the start of its next turn. So if you've got a baddie with 5 or fewer baddie points, that is pack in some skills that make you a little bit anxious, then you can use the joys of Locjaw to keep that baddie from doing anything to you with its skills for the duration of its turn. And then once you've got Locjaw, you can also move on to Mono. Don't be kissing anybody on the battle mat. That's all I gotta say. So Mono is again a die that impacts baddies who are a certain baddie point value or less, so 5 or less. And when this die is active, a baddie that is infected with it will lose its turn. And then in general, negative effects or other agents will still apply. However, this agent is immediately exhausted if the unit loses HP, because this represents them sleeping, and if they lose HP, it's going to wake them up. So if you want somebody to just kind of sit there and snooze, then you can use Mono, but be careful, don't damage them while they're under the impact of this die, because if you do, you'll wake them up and exhaust the agent prematurely. And that is Mono. And then really quick, let's just go ahead and talk about Bandolier, since it's our consumable. So when Bandolier is acquired, you can get faces that either have a 1, a 2, or a 3. And you place this in a locked slot. So you're going to roll it, you're going to lock it. And then during select and roll, you can choose to exhaust Bandolier to add the number of attack dice printed on this die against a single target without spending dex or attack stat. So you might have noticed that Dart has a little bit of an attack supply issue. She can only normally roll 1 attack die against any one baddie on a turn. And she also exhausts her attack dice when she has to roll them with agents. So that means she's constantly in a state of needing more attack dice. Bandolier is great for that because when you exhaust it, you add this number of attack dice against a single target. It doesn't cost anything to your current stat points. And this lets you roll multiple attack dice against one target when normally Dart is unable to do that. So Bandolier is super, super useful. So if you can get it, go for it. Bandolier is great. So that is an overview of all of Dart's dice. And now you might be wondering, well, what is this whole dangerous Dart thing? Why does Dart have an entire extra reference sheet? Well, all of that lies in Dart's backup plan. So I'm going to talk about Dart's normal backup plan stuff first, and then we're going to flip her mat, and I'm going to show you what Rampage mode actually looks like. It's pretty cool. So Dart has a lot of kind of normal backup plan actions that you might see with any other Gearloc. So for 1 bone, she can do Recover, so she can heal for 1 HP. For 2 bones, she can do Biding Time, and that lets you add 1 bone to Dart's backup plan, and you can use an attack or defense die from the supply. You actually also don't have to remove bones when using this backup plan option, which I think is really cool. It just adds bones. Sweet. And you're going to see why you might want to do that very shortly. Here you have Quick and Painless. This allows you to roll an agent from Dart's skills area and apply it to any unit with no dex or attack die required. So you can basically have a freebie with the agents, which is really amazing. For 4 bones, there's nothing. And then for 5, you get Fortunate Discovery, which lets you get Dart's consumable die. That's sweet, sweet Bandolier. And then when you get to 6, you get to upgrade to an 8+1. So that takes Dart from a Peccadillo Wrangler to a Peccadillo Master. So instead of rolling Board's die at the beginning of battle, you can set it to the side that you want instead. So I just always end up setting Board to 3 HP once I have hit this point, this blessed state of an 8+1. But you'll notice here, this red letters, Danger Zone. And that is really the crux of what makes Dart interesting. So let's just go ahead and roll Boar'd. Say that Boar'd has 1 HP, sure. We'll take that off of Boar'd for now. And if Dart has 1 bones and chooses to spend it to activate her backup plan, what she does is she flips this entire mat over, and you can just kind of push all the dice through. You're going to place Boar'd under Dart, so they're going to go into mounted mode together. And then we're actually going to get to rampage around the battle mat, which is super cool. So let's just say that we spent a bone, and then we had these other ones in our plan. So now you're going to see that our backup plan back here, let's just put some dice in it. We're just going to pretend these are all bones that we'd placed earlier. The backup plan has now become a rampage tracker. And so the number of bones that you have remaining in your backup plan after you activate Dangerous Dart mode, those bones represent the number of times you can rampage while you're in that mode, which is very, very cool. So Dart can only do this 1 time per battle. So you're going to want to choose to do it at a specific kind of time. And I'm going to talk to you about the strategy of this really quick before we talk about exactly what rampaging entails. The first thing you're going to want to do is rampage as much as possible. So even though you only need 1 bone to activate this part of the backup plan and switch over into dangerous mode, you don't want to just do that with 1 bone because you have to spend further bones in order to rampage around. So you want to make sure that you have enough bones to have a nice, sweet rampage. And the other thing about doing this only once per battle is that rampage mode allows you to recover dice that are exhausted, and we're going to talk about how that would work. It also allows you, if Boar'd has previously been KO'd this battle, to resurrect Boar'd 1 more time. So when you go into dangerous mode, if Boar'd happens to be exhausted, you get to roll its die and then put it back into the lock slot just this 1 more time during battle. So you don't want to go dangerous too early because you can recover a lot of expended resources by going into this mode. Also note that while dangerous, Dart cannot unmount Boar'd. They have to do this together. So as you can see, the back of this mat contains an image of the battle mat that's like from your point of view, so you don't have to flip or rotate anything. This is a 1-to-1 correspondence with whatever's going on in the battle mat. And that's how you should think about it when you're in dangerous mode. So let's say that we're in rampage mode, and we want to rampage a bunch. So you're going to remove the leftmost die from your backup plan. And then what that means is that you are going to rampage, and you can move Dart 1 or 2 positions. So let's say 1. Sure. If I wanted to move 2, I could actually move through this position and then displace this baddie to an adjacent position of my choice as long as it's open. But let's just go ahead and move 1. And then after moving, Dart can do 1 true damage to an adjacent unit. And then she can also unexhaust 1 attack die. So if you've been exhausting your attack dice because you've been using agents in this battle, then you get that attack die back. You get that attack stat back for after the rampage, which is super, super cool. Alternatively, if you're looking at this little mat, let's say that this was a space where the die had been exhausted. If Dart stops in this space, she can choose to either get an attack die unexhausted or to unexhaust the die that normally goes here. So if I had used this agent and it's exhausted, then I can actually use my dangerous Dart mode to replace it by landing on that spot on the battle mat and then unexhausting the die there because of my special dangerous power. And then after rampaging, I have a choice. I can either stop rampaging, which means that my turn is immediately over and I flip everything back over and we go back to normal. Or I can take a die out and rampage again. So the one catch is that Dart can't do true damage to a baddie 2 turns in a row. So if I damaged this one last time, I got to damage this one during this next rampage. So I can say I can do 1, 2, and I can move into this spot. And I can displace this baddie. And then I can do 1 true damage to it. And then if I want to rampage again, I can do damage again to this one, but not to this one because I just did the true damage to it. So you got to be strategic about your movements when you're rampaging because you got to make sure that you've like budgeted the space to damage things the maximum number of times. So let's say that I feel done now. Basically, what will happen is I'll remove all my remaining dice from the rampage track because we're just done. I'm going to flip the mat back over, and then that will be that. Play will continue as normal. If for some reason you are in rampage mode when you are defeated, or the battle ends while Dart is in rampage mode, then you're still going to flip her back over. She can't stay dangerous between battles or anything like that. She's always eventually going to flip back over before the battle ends. One thing that's very cool about Dart, by the way, is that if you look at her stat dice, they only go up to 3. But it's because when you put them in this slot and then flip her into dangerous mode, the value stays the same on both sides. So you actually can track, everything just stays the same and the flipping works visually and in terms of the dice that you had. So I think that's awesome, honestly. And that is how dangerous mode works with Dart. So now we're kind of in the final part of the video. Let's go ahead and just talk really quickly about beginner build strat. Because that's really where we're at. We've talked about how Dart attacks, how she and Boar'd interact, what dangerous mode is like, and how agents function with attack dice, which means that you basically know everything you really need to know about playing Dart. So we do have a beginner build strat. So your first stat or 2 should go towards HP. Then you should invest at least 1 training point into attack so that when you exhaust attack dice, that's not so detrimental. Because remember, if you use an agent, you also exhaust the attack die you have to roll with it. So you need to have enough attack dice to do attacking and also to use your agents. Then if you want to prioritize dex over defense, you can do so if you're feeling lucky. I actually often do. And then skills. It's recommended that you try Toxicologist Profession first to get some board control. This helps you do some nasty stuff to your enemies. And then, of course, never underestimate the power of going dangerous. I also like the pun here. So you're supposed to get Toxicologist for board control, and then you need to get some Deliriant for some board control. Oh, so funny. Oh, and speaking of, I meant to mention Deliriant again. You'll note that it's got bones on it that go into your backup plan. When this die is in your rampage track and you use it, again, we noted that Boar'd can only move 1 or 2 spaces with a normal rampage, but whatever side of this die is up, you're going to add that number to the spaces that Boar'd could move when spending that die to rampage. So that's pretty fantastic. And that's all the basics of Dart and Boar'd. So Dart seems really complicated at first, but she actually just has some really cool abilities that make her quite the powerhouse. So I hope that you feel less scared of her after watching this video. I hope that you think the baddies will feel very scared of her after watching this video, and that you give her a try on your next game night. I will be back soon with another Gearloc video, because we are still not out of Gearlocs. There's so many of these, and I'm really excited about that. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful to you, and most of all, happy gaming.